We're excited to host our second virtual lecture with all of you titled Sharks Are Snowbirds Too, Migration of Blacktip Sharks in Southeast Florida. Today's topic will be presented by Dr. Stephen Kajura, a professor at Florida Atlantic University. So without further ado, Dr. Kajura, let me hand it over to you.
All right, so now let me try and share this. And are you guys able to see a title slide at this point? Thumbs up if you can. Yeah. All right. Beautiful. Great. So thank you. First off, thank you so much for the invitation to come and talk to you today about some of the work that we've been doing. I'm just going to try and fire this up so I can see. Gotcha. All right. So my lab has been looking at the seasonal migration of these blacktip sharks for over a decade now. And it's always fun to talk to the local community and tell them about some of the work that's happening right in their backyard. And you'd be surprised often that people are largely unaware of this fantastic natural phenomenon that's taking place right off our shores. And I don't know if you can see from the screen, hopefully you can see this little video clip playing over and over again. All those little dots that you see moving on the screen like that, every one of those is a blacktip shark. They're just sort of milling around in the shallow water here. This is from an aerial drone that's parked overhead filming down on them. And there are literally thousands of sharks very close to the beach. And so what happened to start this whole research program some years ago was I was getting calls from local television stations because their helicopters would get footage like this. They'd be flying along and they'd see all these sharks on the water, and they'd contact me as a local shark guy and say, "Hey, listen, look at all the sharks here. Should we be concerned about this? What's happening? Why are there so many sharks around?" And I'd tell them, well, this is the annual migration. Sharks come down in the wintertime and they spend a few months here, and that's, they do this all the time. It's nothing really to be concerned about. But it really opened up an opportunity when I realized that there was very little work that had been done on this phenomenon. And it's great because you can see all these sharks in the water. Now, I don't know, can you see my little cursor moving on the screen here, wiggling around in the center of the screen? Yeah, thumbs up, great. And so you can see all these sharks here in the water, right? And here you got people on the beach. See them circling these three little people on the beach here, and they're debating. Do I go in the water today? I don't know. It's an awful lot of sharks. But you can see how close they are, how close the sharks are to the people. And same thing. You can have some guy walking down the beach, having a good old time, enjoying a stroll, and I can see sharks. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just right in this frame alone. This guy could be walking on the beach and looking out at the sharks here, right? They're right there. And you can imagine, especially if you're one of the people who's fortunate enough to have a house on the beach, you could walk out your backyard, walk down the beach, and then have sharks in your backyard. Wouldn't that be great? Well, I would think it's great. I think it's great. Personally, I would love to have sharks in my backyard. I'm a shark biologist. But maybe some of these people are less impressed. I don't know. But the point is, there's lots of sharks. They're right up against the beach, right where the people are. And this is what got everyone's attention. And this is why the news agencies kept calling me saying, what's happening with all these sharks? And I said, well, these are a common species around here. This is called the blacktip shark, Carcharodontis limbatus. And these blacktip sharks, they're about an average size shark, medium size shark. I tell people they're the same size as me. I'm 5'9" tall. And these sharks average about 5'9" to 6 feet long. So they're about the same size as a standard human. Okay, so not really big sharks, they're just average size sharks. And they come down here in the wintertime. And what we wanted to do was get some numbers to associate with this, to tell people a little bit more, because it turns out that we knew very little about this annual migration. And so I said, well, this is a real opportunity. Let's do what we can to do some good shark science, and in the meantime, help to inform the local community about what's happening right in their backyard. Now, what started us down this road, like I said, was all these news helicopters getting footage. And so I thought, you know what, maybe the way to do this is to study the sharks from the sky. they're getting these great helicopter shots. Maybe looking down from above is the way to get a really good idea of what's happening with these shark populations. And so I'm a pilot, I fly. And so I thought this is a great opportunity for me to study sharks and fly an airplane at the same time. My two hobbies, basically. And so what we did is we started by renting a little airplane, a little Cessna 172. All right. And originally, when we first started this project, we just covered Palm Beach County. So from Boca Raton up to Jupiter Inlet and just covered the Palm Beach County area. Subsequently, we've now expanded our project and we go all the way from Miami up to Jupiter. And that's what we've been doing since 2015 up to the present time. And what we do is we take a high definition video camera and we mount it out the window of the plane and another digital still camera behind that one. Right, and so the window's open. These things are out the window, clamped onto the side of the plane here, and we fly along the beach. We fly from Miami up to Jupiter at low altitude, 500 feet off the deck, right, 500 feet off the surface of the water, nice and slow, 70 knots. And with these two cameras here, we're just basically recording the whole time. So from the time we start the transect, I hit record on the video camera, and the still takes a picture every 2 seconds, and it records the whole time. It takes about an hour to fly this stretch from Miami to Jupiter. And then at the end, we stop recording, go back and download the data to analyze, see where the sharks are. And so just to give you a sort of a view of what this looks like, this is sort of like the cartoon view here. You can see the airplane in the upper, on the top here, it's sort of flying out of the screen towards you. And then this is the beach, right? There's a little beach umbrella, with sharks in the water. And what the camera is seeing is it's getting a field of view looking straight down from the side of the plane, and it's covering a field of view from about the beach to about 200 meters offshore. And we're focusing on this very close to shore area because that's where the people are, right? That's where the people and sharks are going to interact. And we know that there's more sharks out here, or it's deeper, but you can only do so much. It's an ocean. You can't count every fish. So we're just concentrating on the ones that are near the beach here. Now, the nice thing is, 2 football fields, 100 yards for a football field, right? You guys watched the game last weekend, right? 100 yards, so 200 yards basically is what you're talking about, two football field lengths away from shore. And at that distance, the water's still pretty shallow. And so it's only about 4 meters deep at the most between Miami and Jupiter at that distance. And so what that means is you have a nice shallow water area with light sandy bottom and lots of little sharks, and they show up as nice little black dots on the bottom. They stand out against the sandy seafloor, and that makes it fairly easy to count them and distinguish them from other structures. And so what that camera is actually recording as it's doing this, as it's looking down and constantly recording, it gets a field of view that looks something like this. Okay. And so at the top here, you can see the strut on the airplane. On the bottom, that's the tire on the plane. Here's the beach on the far left side here. And every one of those little dots that you see in this frame is a shark. All right. And so I want you to remember, there's 1 football field. There's 2 football fields. That's not very far from shore. Right. And you can see how many sharks there are. Well, remember, we're in an airplane. We're not a helicopter. You can't stop. You just have to keep on going. And so if you're flying along, you don't have a lot of time to count. And in fact, you would have about 2 seconds to count that. You ready? Go. 1, 2, stop. How many sharks are there? You have 2 seconds. No one knows. You can't count that high, right? Lots is the answer. If you're to sit there and take your video footage back, that's why we have to take the video footage back to the lab, look at it on the computer, go through slowly, and count the number of sharks. So just to satisfy your curiosity, if you sat there and counted, you would see that there are 1,678 sharks in that frame. And so obviously there's no way you can count that in real time. That's why we have the video recorded and analyze the footage back in the lab. And so what we do, I'm just going to show you just a brief 30-second video clip from which I extracted this frame, just to show you what it looks like as we're flying along here. All right. And so this footage was taken when we first started this program back in 2011. And here you can see as we're flying along, there's the wheel and there's the strut at the top. Here's the beach, right? And there's the sharks. And you can see all these little sharks, all those little dots on the screen. Every one of those is a shark as we keep flying along here. And as we go, I want you to notice that you can get these big aggregations. So here's this big school that I just took that still frame from, that huge, massive school of sharks. There's a boat going by, you know. And as you're flying along, you see it just keeps going. There's more sharks. Look at them all. They're right there. All right, so there's lots of sharks. And this is like just like a 30-second clip out of the whole transect, out of the whole survey. And if you look over here, I don't know if you can see on the far left side of the screen here, you can see the road, right? There's A1A. You can literally drive down the road and, you know, toss a pebble out of your car and hit a shark. I mean, you're that close, right? And so it's indicative, first off, that there's lots of sharks close to the beach. It's also indicative that it's a stupid place to put a road. But you know, that's another whole question. But what we do is we take this video footage back to the lab. We go through it carefully, slowly, and we count, you know, numbers of sharks. You advance the video and count more sharks, and we keep track of where they are. You know, or how many are there between, you know, Boynton Inlet and Palm Beach Inlet? How many between Palm Beach Inlet and Jupiter Inlet, and et cetera? And how many are there total? And then we do this for years now. And what we found here, this is just looking at shark abundance. This is the number of sharks that we saw over the transects, the times that we're doing it. So we started in 2011, and we saw huge numbers of sharks when we started. You know, 12,000 sharks at a time on one of these survey transects. And the numbers dropped off precipitously in the spring. And so by the summertime, there were hardly any sharks at all, hardly anything here. And then in the winter, January, February, jumped right back up again, and then dropped off to hardly anything. So you got these really sharp seasonal spikes in shark abundance. Well, we stopped actually doing summer transects because there's hardly anything there. We just go like once a month or something now. But you got these large seasonal spikes. Now, what's interesting is when you start to overlay the water temperature data with that, here you see this sort of inverse relationship. Lots of sharks when the water temperature is really low. In the summertime, when the water temperature is high, there's no sharks, right? And so when one is high, the other is low. Lots of sharks, low temperature. You know, high temperature, very few sharks. All right, so you got this up and down, up and down, up and down, this sort of seasonal cycle of water temperature and seasonal peaks of shark abundance. Now, I want, with that in the back of your head, that shark abundance tracks inversely with temperature. We know that the oceans are warming. This is, you know, the heat content of the ocean keeps rising, and we have data. These are the average water temperatures just in the wintertime, January through April, January, February, March, April. All right, first 4 months of the year for 2011, 12, 13, et cetera, right here off in Palm Beach County. And what we have seen is that right here, water temperature, what's it doing? It's rising. Our water temperature has been getting warmer and warmer and warmer since we started this project in 2011, even if you throw out the very first year when it was coldest. And even if you throw out this year when it was warmest, it's still a positive, significant trend, right? If the water temperature keeps rising, what does that mean to shark numbers? Water temperature goes up, shark numbers go down. And in fact, that's what we see. We see, shark abundance. This is peak abundance. We used to get 12,000 sharks on a survey. Now the abundance is down, 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 down. It's a significant negative trend for this as well. And in fact, 2020 was the worst year we've ever had for sharks. We didn't even get 2,000 sharks on a survey when we used to get 6 times that amount when we started this project. All right. Temperatures are rising. Water's getting warmer, getting fewer and fewer sharks. So we wanted to know what was happening after the sharks left here, right? This aerial survey is great, but it only gives you the snapshot when they're down here in South Florida. You know, when they go migrate north, what was happening then? And so to start to address that, we wanted to incorporate satellite telemetry. And so here, what we do is we go out fishing, we catch the sharks when they're here. Here's my student, Beth. She's affixing a satellite transmitter to the fin. And so this thing is stuck on the fin. And anytime that fin breaks the surface of the water, this transmitter will talk to an orbiting Argos satellite overhead. up in space, and it will relay its position. It'll give it the GPS fix for where that shark is located. And in addition to giving a GPS fix, it also gives us the water temperature at that point where the shark is when it's reporting its position. Okay, so what we're able to do now is we tag these sharks in the wintertime when they're visiting us down here in South Florida, and then we're able to look at their movement as they go as they leave here. And so, for example, you can tag a shark off. This was tagged off Palm Beach in March of 2017, for example. And every dot here represents a time, at least one time, when that fin broke the surface of the water and sent a signal up to the satellite to say, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. All right. And so we're able to see as the shark made its migration all the way up the coast, it was hugging the shoreline. It was, you know, it wasn't catching a ride on the Gulf Stream or something. It was swimming right up against the beach, pretty much all the way up. And we lost it around Cape Hatteras a few months later. All right, we've done this for a number of sharks now. This is just this is one of the first examples. That's why it's here. But some of the ones that we tagged this year, they were going all the way up to Long Island. I had a shark off Montauk for a month in September this year, for example, way off the eastern tip of Long Island, right? And so they're going way up there. But remember what I said about these satellite transmitters not only giving you the GPS location, but also giving you the water temperature? Well, we're able to look at the temperature that these sharks are inhabiting as they're doing their migration between Florida all the way up to New York. And what we found is that these sharks really have a relatively narrow temperature preference, right? They like water between around 22 to 23, 22 to 24 maybe Celsius, okay? That's low 70s in Fahrenheit, all right? And in fact, if you were to just to sum these high bars, it's like 85% of their time or something is in water of only a 3-degree span. You have very few hits below that, very few hits above that. They like this temperature and they will follow that temperature north, and then they will follow that temperature back south again, okay? And so that's what they're doing. They are staying within their narrow thermal tolerance, their preference, thermal preference, as they migrate north in the springtime, and as they follow that same temperature back down south here in the fall, all right? And so what's interesting is, if you look at the historic range for these blacktips have been reported to go from South Florida up to about Cape Hatteras, North Carolina in the summertime. And then they migrate back down to Florida in the wintertime, right? What's interesting is, like I said, based on current data and the fact that the oceans are getting warmer, they are finding their preferred temperatures, not off Hatteras, they are finding their preferred temperatures now all the way up off New York, all right? And so, like I said, we're getting sharks singing off Long Island all summer, when before, just 70 years ago, they rarely went north of Hatteras, right? This is a significant increase in their migratory range. They are simply going much farther in the summertime, and as a result, they're not coming quite as far south in the wintertime. That's why we're seeing fewer and fewer sharks down here in just the past decade. They're actually shifting their distribution a little bit north. We have anecdotal reports that these sharks are in huge numbers, not here in Palm Beach County, but now they're off Fort Pierce, right? And so they're just shifting their way north. I mean, you know, if you're migrating, why bother swimming all the way down to Palm Beach if you get your preferred water temperature off Fort Pierce? You know, save yourself 50 miles of migration, just stop there. It's, you know, it's a temperature-driven migration, which is really important for them. They like that narrow temperature band, and so why bother going anywhere farther south if you're finding your warm preferred temperature at that location? Well, this sort of work is great because it gives us this long distance movements of these animals. Where are they going along these, you know, along the length of their migration? But one of the other things we wanted to look at in a bit more detail is, what are these sharks doing when they're actually here in the wintertime? More fine scale movements. I mean, they're here for like 2-3 months, you know, January through March or so. That's a significant chunk of time that they're right in our backyard. What are they actually doing in that time? And so to do that, we're incorporating these new types of data logger tags. And what these are, these will affix to the shark as well, but they record temperature, Also the depth, how deep is the shark? What's the light level, when it's day or night or whatever? The swimming velocity, how quickly is the shark moving? It gives us 3-axis acceleration, and magnetic heading and intensity. And so all of this is in this little tiny package that affixes to the shark. And it comes with 2 other things: a satellite transmitter so we can find it again, and a little VHF transmitter so we can locate it more precisely in space. So I tell people the satellite transmitter tells you where the haystack is, and then the VHF transmitter tells you where the needle is within it. So the satellite transmitter says it's somewhere within this 5-kilometer range, or 1 kilometer range, and the satellite and the VHF says it's right over there. All right. With these data loggers, we're able to get a more fine scale idea of what the sharks are doing. What's their daily, I call it the daily diary. What are they doing every day? In the morning, when the light level is, just starting to peak, they start swimming quickly and they go out to deep water and they spend 2 hours chasing fish around, and then they head west back toward the beach and they cruise north and south along the beach nice and slowly in shallow water or something, right? And so these are the sorts of data that you can reconstruct the daily movements of the animals by monitoring all of these environmental parameters from the shark as well. And this is just sort of what it looks like. You're just taking the hook out of a shark. There's a package affixed to the fin. This is one of the early packages. Our new ones are much more streamlined, in fact. But we let it go, and off it goes, carrying that little package. And what happens is that stays on for a few days, and then it pops off. It releases from the shark, floats to the surface. So the shark has no hardware on it. It's gone. And then we go and retrieve it and download the data. All right. This is giving us the first really fine scale idea of what these sharks are doing when they're down here in the wintertime for a few months. And in fact, just this week, we had one of our transmitters, we instrumented a shark on Saturday. It popped off on Monday. We went and picked it up. It was a woman had found it on the beach. We were out there on the boat with the directional antenna saying it's right over there by those condos. And by the time we took our boat back and parked it so we could go and drive over there, a woman had found it and called us. We have our number on there. Says, hey, she found this tag on the beach. What do we do with this? And we said, thank you so much. We have a reward for you. And so it was a great opportunity as well for us to share with at least this one woman, and hopefully a broader audience, the importance of this work and get her directly involved. You found our package for us. Thank you. This is why it's important. And we're sharing this information with her, and I get to tell you guys about this fun story as well. Anyway, the one last thing I want to talk about before we take our break here is another aspect that we're looking at when we're down here in South Florida, when the sharks are down here in South Florida, and that is the underwater view. All of this that we've been doing is sort of, from the air or, these data logger packages, but, it's great to get the visual, what are they doing? And so for that, we came up with a simple thing called a block cam. It's literally just a GoPro camera screwed onto a concrete block with a float so we can find it again. We start the camera recording, we lower it down into the water, and then at that, it just starts recording. And anytime a shark swims by, we're able to get that sort of underwater footage, that firsthand view of what these sharks are doing. And it gives us an opportunity to get some really cool footage. This is an example of just dropping the block cams in our regular fishing area right off Palm Beach. And you can see the sharks just cruising by, and there's lots of them. This is what the underwater view of that school looks like. And you can see here's, they're all black-tip sharks. You can confirm, yes, they're black-tips. Yes, they're males, and yes, there's lots of them. And you can see how shallow that water is. That water is like what, maybe 5 feet deep or so, looks like. Then it's not deep. And so you get an idea that these sharks are right there cruising around in the shallows. And this sort of footage really helps us to tell the story as well, to really engage the public. And so this is the first part that I want to talk to you about before we shift gears a little bit. So at this point, let's just, I can stop this real quick, I think. And there you go. And did we want to open it up to a few questions right now before we continue?
Yes, that's great. Oh, go ahead, Kristen. I wasn't sure if the audio was working. Go right ahead.
Yeah, hey everybody. Martha, I can see you raising your hand if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question to Dr. Kajura. Oh, and Martha, you are muted, so you just have to unmute yourself. Or we can help with that.
Okay, there it goes. I just wondered if there were any sharks on the Gulf side.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. We haven't done anything over there. Yes, there are sharks on the Gulf side. That's the quick answer. But we don't know about their migration. And one of the problems is they're constrained by Texas and Louisiana. They can't go any farther north. They hit a northern limit, right? And so they don't have the opportunity to migrate quite as far north and south as the ones on this side. What is interesting is there has been some genetics work that shows that the population of blacktip sharks in the Gulf is genetically distinct from the population of blacktips on our side. So it's the same species, but they're two separate populations. And the National Marine Fisheries Service manages them separately as well, and manages the Gulf population differently and separately than it manages the Atlantic side. So yes, they're there. They're moving around. We don't know as much about their migration as we do on our side, I'm afraid.
I noticed some people, they were kayaking their fishing line from the beach way out for tiger sharks.
Yeah.
And then they drop the line and then wait. And I thought, are there sharks here? So that's kind of.
Yep,
so.
There are. And you know, you'll see in a second that it's not just the blacktips, it's the predators of the blacktips that are here. And so there's even bigger sharks out there.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for just a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a question, Margaret Domansky, and I'm up on the Treasure Coast, Professor, and I'm wondering, looking at your little GoPro, I didn't see a lot of schools of smaller fish. So what is the principal food group of these sharks in terms of their predatory behavior?
Right.
What are they looking for?
They are looking for little fish, and I do have footage of lots of little fish as well. You know, little menhaden and mullets, and you know, a bunch of little bait fish. But I could show you footage of that another time. But we do have lots of that prey fish footage as well. So
and do they breed in these waters, or do they breed when they go north, when they migrate north?
It's in the Carolinas, Georgia, Carolinas. That's where mating takes place, and the females will give birth to their pups in some of these shallow bays and estuaries around in Georgia and the Carolinas area. And so they're summering up there. That's where all the mating happens, and then they come down here in the winter when it gets basically too cold for them up there.
They go up to Maine?
So do we principally get males down here then in the wintertime, or?
Yeah,
because you mentioned that's a male, that's a male, that's a male as they went swimming by.
It's interesting that down here in South Florida, our fishing has been almost 100% males. We have caught like 2 females out of hundreds of sharks, and those 2 were caught in the, you know, before the big mass of these sharks came down. And so it's common for sharks to have this sort of sexual segregation where males and females segregate out separately. But it's almost all males down here, and the females are just a little bit farther north. They're not coming quite this far.
Interesting.
Do they go to
And
Maine?
Betsy, I heard you chime in. Go ahead, Betsy.
I swim in Maine. I want to know if they go up there off the Maine shore, Maine coast.
They do not go up to Maine.
Oh, good.
You just have white sharks up there.
Oh.
But yeah, blacktips are not going any farther than New York right now.
This is
But we do
fascinating.
have some other ones up there to be concerned about, or to be
Thank you. This is
cautious about.
wonderful.
And we've had a number of questions submitted both in advance and on the chat. We actually, there are several that were submitted in advance that I'm just going to hold because I don't want to have any spoilers with the rest of your content, Dr. Kajura. But one semi-related question that was submitted is, does this disruption in the migrating patterns show negative impacts to their reproduction and or feeding habits?
That's a really good question. I think what's going to be interesting is I think we're going to see them starting to give birth at higher and higher latitudes. It's going to be in the Carolinas. It's going to be in Virginia. You know, they're going to have nursery grounds farther and farther north. And the reason we make this is not only prediction is not only because of the warming temperature, but we've seen this with bull sharks already. Just 2019 or something, just recently, a colleague of mine documented a nursery ground for bull sharks in Pamlico Sound in North Carolina, when decades of historic data demonstrated that they were never there before. All right. And so the fact that they're actually giving birth in these higher and higher latitudes indicates that as ocean temperatures keep rising and these sharks shift their distribution, we're going to see mating take place farther north. We're going to see nursery areas farther north. It's going to shift their distribution. So yeah, I think it is going to have an impact going forward.
And then I just want to acknowledge that we've had a few questions relating to their migratory range, which I know that you addressed earlier on. So if the folks who asked those questions feel that they still have outstanding questions, I'd encourage you to again submit those in the chat or over Facebook Live. And then I know you showed us also that excellent footage of you doing the tagging. We had some questions about what is the process for tagging sharks, which was also kind of touched on, but again, let us know if you feel that wasn't answered. And then maybe finally for this portion, I see a question from Greg in the chat that says, are there resident blacktips that don't migrate on the East Coast?
Yeah, excellent. And yes, there are some resident blacktips down here. And that's something that we're going to start looking at this year. We're supposed to start doing it last year, but COVID shut down all our field work in the spring and summer, so we couldn't do anything. So hopefully we're able to pick that up at this year, because we do see some females who stay here year round, and I'm curious. You know, I don't know what they're doing, so we're going to put some long life multi-year transmitters on those to see where they're going. So stay tuned. I'll have an answer for you in a couple of years.
Excellent. Well, maybe in the interest of time, we can go ahead and move on for now, and then we'll get back to the rest of the Q&A at the end of the session today.
All righty. Let me see if I can share this one more time. Okay, so you should see this, the video that we just played, the block cam video, right? The end of that. So now, the next thing, do you see something that says drones with a drone sitting there, thumbs up? Yeah, okay, good job. So one of the things that we've been starting to incorporate the last couple of years are these aerial drones. And if you've never flown one, they're pretty easy. They're fun. They're pretty easy. And the nice thing is they're becoming much more accessible. You know, anyone off the street can go ahead and buy a drone and fly it around. It's not that difficult anymore. The software is really good. And part of this comes back to the fact that we've been studying these sharks from the sky, been doing these aerial surveys for over a decade now. And this top-down view really gives you a good idea of what's happening all around in the area. And so with these sharks being so close to the beach like this, it's easy to go out anytime, walk down to the beach, take your drone, toss it up and fly over these schools of sharks and get some really good footage this way, right? And we can use this not only for, you know, for fun photos like this, but we use it to help with our fishing. When we're out, there we go. When we're out fishing, right, here's our boat, there's the beach. You see how close we are to the beach and see all the sharks in the water here, right? We use the drone as a way to cheat. You know, we fly it and say, oh, that's where the sharks are. And that's where we go and drop all our lines, right? So we fly along the beach for a few kilometers and say, oh, we go fish over there. And that's where we'll be most successful. So in that sense, it's really handy because we're able to see where the sharks are, target our fishing, and be much more efficient rather than just sort of dropping our lines blind and hoping for the best. This way, we're actually able to see exactly where we should be going. And again, this video just sort of illustrates again how close we are to the beach. I mean, that's us. There's the beach. There's the sharks. You know, they're right there. So when we're fishing, we're not offshore very far. We are 6 feet of water or less. All right. The other thing that we use the drones for, in addition to cheating with our fishing, we use the drones also to get some behavioral data. And so when these sharks are swimming, we're curious, are these sharks swimming a nice polarized school? Is everyone swimming all parallel to each other, or are they all off doing their own thing? Here you can see that they're pretty parallel. What's the spacing between them? What's the packing density of these sharks? What's their swimming velocity? How quickly are they moving? What's their what's their tail beat frequency? How many times are they beating the tail back and forth? And how does that relate to their velocity, right? So we're able to get a lot of information about the swimming kinematics, the swimming behavior and the social behavior of these animals as they're swimming by just sort of parking a drone over there and looking at these sharks interacting with each other in that way, okay? And so again, that's another whole aspect. There's another whole PhD student doing his dissertation work just on the swimming kinematics of these animals. And things like, how birds, when they flock together and fly in a V formation as they're migrating south, right? You see this with a lot of big birds. They're taking advantage of the vortices generated by the bird in front of them and reducing the amount of work they have to do to fly. The same thing with these sharks. As they swim in these nice little groups like this, they are forming little patterns amongst each other so that they're taking advantage of the trailing vortices off the other sharks to sort of catch a ride. And it's a more efficient form of swimming than if you were just swimming by yourself. And this might be one of the reasons we see these big aggregations of these sharks. It's an efficient form of locomotion for them. And the last thing we use the drones for is to look at social behaviors in a different way. And that's predator-prey relationships. So hopefully you can see on the screen, you can see a hammerhead shark, a big hammerhead coming up to this school of black tips here. And you'll see as this hammerhead comes in, first off, he's double the size of these guys. This is like an 11 or 12 foot hammerhead shark, so they're big, right? The black tips are like half the size. Notice also how close he gets to those black tips before they finally notice. And then when one sends the alarm, they all bolt and all swim away. And poor hammerhead gets nothing. So he's cruising along. He lost his chance, man. He should have gone for it and grabbed that black tip. But we're able to get this sort of natural predatory behavior that's so rare to be able to see in the wild. And you hardly ever see it with marine organisms because they're underwater. But the drones give us this opportunity to get this window, this insight into what these animals are actually doing. And now you can see those black tips are much more wary, far more skittish than they were the first time. They're not letting that hammerhead get anywhere near them. But then you'll notice in just a second, I'm just going to keep playing this because it's fun. You'll see in just a second that hammerhead actually finally commits to trying to get one of these black tips. And you'll see a dramatic change in his swimming behavior as he just starts of, changes gear and says, go. And then he starts to chase down the black tips. And then you'll see that coming up right about in just about 1 second here as he comes in. Now, go. And now you see that change in behavior. He is not just cruising anymore. He is chasing now, chasing down those black tips. I won't show you what happens. I'll leave that to your imagination. If you want to know later, I'll show you in the end, but I'll cut it off there. But I will end just by saying that down here in South Florida, we are fortunate to have so many of these sharks come right down to visit us every winter. And here you have people on the beach, right? All these beach goers, humans on the beach, sharks in the water right here, right near them. And I want to emphasize that we have very few negative interactions down here in South Florida. Very few people are actually bitten by sharks, despite the fact that we have literally thousands of them right near where the people are. And a couple of reasons for that. One is that we have nice clear water down here. So the shark, as it's coming along, can see that we're a big, bulky, clumsy human. We're not a little bait fish. We're not a little menhaden or something. So they leave us alone, right? We're not a food item for them. They skedaddle when they come close to us. And so because of that, because of the nice clarity of the water and the sharks are able to distinguish us from prey, we have relatively few bites. And so I encourage people, when the sharks are here, take advantage of this. This is a fantastic natural migratory phenomenon. And like I said, we might not be seeing this in a few years. We're seeing far fewer of these sharks down here. And so if you can catch it while you can, go do it. Go see the sharks down by the beach, because it's a great opportunity, and it's something that you'll be able to tell people about. I remember when there were thousands of sharks here, and I used to see them right off the beach. And it's a great story to be able to tell whoever else generations from now. Well, I'm going to end by acknowledging the Colgan Foundation. They've been funding our work for a number of years on this. We're very grateful for the support of the Colgan family. And if you're on social media, if you're on Twitter or Instagram, I encourage you to follow us. We're at Shark Migration. Or if you're on Facebook, we are FAU Shark Migration. So you can keep up with our work there. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much again for the opportunity to share some of this with you. And we can pause it here and take more questions. Let's see how I do this.
Thank you.
All righty, how's that?
It's great.
Well, I can hop in. We had a couple of other questions, Dr. Kajura, that do tie back into the migration. Jan asked, it seems that going south, they stay close to the shore. Do they go into the Gulf Stream when they go north?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's what we thought they might be doing initially. Basically hitching a ride. You know, hitch a ride in the Gulf Stream. It's much more efficient, right? It's faster, it's less energy for you. But what we found from our satellite tags is these sharks are not doing that. They are hugging the coastline on their way north. And this is consistent. Several individuals have done the same thing, where they are right up close to the beach all the way up north. So they're taking the long way home. But you know, that's what they're doing.
And then I'll just chime in with one more that was submitted in advance relating to the change in the migration that you're seeing. Are you aware if this change is occurring in other areas of similar latitudes?
Right, yeah. So for example, there's other sharks that are doing these sorts of migrations as well, in addition to these black tips that we're studying. The reason the black tips get all the attention is because they're the ones up against the beach, right? That's what the ones people see. But there's other sharks that are off in deeper water doing the same sort of north and south migration. And this has been documented in other species as well. Other species have been found to be shifting their migratory range in response to, it correlates with water temperature, basically. So it's not just the black tips. This is a larger scale phenomenon where other things are shifting as well.
Did I say, Martha, we can take one more question from you. Go ahead.
Okay. How come you never see any other fish or schools of fish? Does your camera just pick up sharks, or do you see the other fish, snook or anything?
Yeah, we do see other schools of fish as well. So we have video footage of massive schools of thousands of little bait fish swimming by. And my poor student Mackenzie, it's her project to count the numbers of individuals that swim by. And it's easy if it's a shark, 1, 2, 3, you're done. If you get a school of 1,000 little bait fish, I told her, you know what, don't even bother, Mackenzie, just say thousands or whatever. We'll deal with that in statistics. It's there's way too many to count. But yes, we do see the schools of little bait fish as well. You know, what's interesting, just briefly, we look at the seasonal abundance of the bait fish, and it builds up throughout the year, and then it's at its highest in January. And then by April, after the sharks have gone, it's like crashed down to hardly anything again. It takes them a whole year to build up again. So the sharks really have a significant effect on the local bait fish population.
Thank you. That's great. That's good.
Well, actually, we had one more question that's related to that was submitted in advance. That was, what other species might be impacted by the loss of migrating black-tip sharks to the area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you don't have this annual influx of these top-level predators, right? You could have, say 20 years from now, right? You don't have huge numbers of black tips coming down to Palm Beach County anymore. You could have a lot of little bait fish building up, and they could be really eating a lot of the little fish, and they could be really eating a lot of the zooplankton and the phytoplankton. So it has cascading effects down through multiple trophic levels. And so if you get rid of the top predators, you could have chaos, underneath at the other trophic levels. We don't know. It's simply an unknown at this point. We can't model that yet. We don't have enough data, but it is certainly something that we would be, very interested in pursuing. And that's why we're monitoring now. The last couple of years, we've been monitoring bait fish abundance as well, to look at that over time. And it's one of those things where you say, oh, I wish I had data from 20 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever. We don't have it. So we have to start somewhere. So we started in, 2 years ago. That's all we've got. But it's going to be good for someone else 20 years hence. And they'll be able to say, oh, well, I'm glad they started doing that.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's a good.
Well, and maybe to continue on with the conservation line, Dr. Kajira, you touched on what researchers are doing. We had another question submitted in advance that says, I've heard that shark populations are dropping fast. What is known and what can be done?
There was a recent paper that came out just earlier this month, last week or the week before, recent Nick Dalby's group over in Simon Fraser University, where they looked at the populations of oceanic sharks. So not the ones close to the beach like ours, but often open water. And they found dramatic reductions in shark populations. And we've known for a long time that shark numbers are going down, but they had some really good numbers to put to it. And they were able to say that we have lost 70% of our shark populations or something. They're in a significant downward trend. As private individuals, I'm not sure quite what we can do. What this really boils down to is management at an international level. And so, for example, the US might have really good, National Marine Fisheries has good management of shark populations, but sharks don't recognize international boundaries. Sharks go wherever they want. It's the ocean, right? And so we might be protecting them in the US, but they might be heading south and exploited off Venezuela or Brazil or something, somewhere else, right? And so that comes down to the root of the problem. I'm not sure quite what we can do. We can raise the alarm and say this needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed at an international level. But I'm afraid I don't have a good solution for it. I wish I did. I want to save the sharks more than anything, but I don't have an easy solution for what we as individuals can do to affect international policy. Maybe you guys have more leads than I do along those lines.
Well, then maybe another point about the impact that we see to sharks. We had a question submitted in advance that is, can you please share how the quality of ocean water, i.e. pollution, can interfere or damage the biological structure of the blacktip sharks?
What's interesting is these sharks will give birth in these shallow coastal estuaries, right? So you've got all this fresh water coming in from the rivers that are dumping into the ocean and forming these little bays and estuaries where these little juvenile sharks are born, and they'll spend the first year or two of their life in this habitat before they grow big enough and then go join the adult population offshore. A lot of these estuaries are associated with agricultural lands where you've got a lot of runoff, a lot of fertilizer use, pesticide use, various chemicals that have been added. All of that trickles down. That gets washed down into the streams, that gets washed down into the ocean, and that's where these sharks are living for these early developmental years, year or two. And so they are exposed to massive levels of, maybe environmental estrogens or, phosphates, whatever. This could be having long-term ramifications. There have been previous studies where they have looked at the effects of environmental estrogens on sex determination in other fish, tilapia, I think, or I can't remember what the species was, whatever, some other fish. And they found that it is majorly screwing up the endocrine system of these developing little embryos, these developing little fish. And so this could very much be the same sort of scenario that we would be seeing in these estuaries where you have all this runoff, all this environmental pollutants that are being dumped in and impacting these young, vulnerable, developing animals at their most sensitive time period in their life. So it's certainly something that is a concern, and we're all in favor of clean water and having a clean environment and not dumping these sorts of things into the ocean. It's not our giant, it's not a giant cesspool that we dump all our waste into. Let's keep it clean.
Great point, and maybe also a good tie back to the question about what can we do as individuals. And then I wanted to skip back to a couple of questions that were submitted earlier. You touched a little bit on the work that you hope to tackle in the future with the females. And there were a couple of questions about why don't we see as many females in Palm Beach County, and where are they if you all are not seeing them?
Right. Here's my pet hypothesis, and I don't have the data yet. What I've heard anecdotally from fishermen is they're catching a lot of females farther north, Vero Beach, Fort Pierce and stuff. They're just not coming quite this far south. Okay. Here's what I think is happening, and this is so politically incorrect, I'm going to get slammed by all the women in the audience, but it reminds me of the pregnant woman and her husband hypothesis. That's what I call it. All right. And so if you've ever watched a pregnant woman walking with her husband, the two of them walking along, and the husband will eventually pull out in front of her because she's slow, she's waddling, she's carrying the little baby, right? These sharks, the females, they're pregnant this time of year. And so as they're migrating south, I've got the feeling these males are like ignorant husbands who just keep swimming faster and ignore their poor struggling females who are behind them. And the females say, oh, you go on to Palm Beach, I'll stay here in Treasure Coast. And they don't quite make it as far. I think that might be what's happening. The females are simply not making the trip. It's more energy for them, and they're simply not doing it. Again, I don't have the data on that yet. And again, it's I'm sure it's socially irresponsible for me to say something like that, but that's sort of what it reminded me of, watching couples walking along. Anyway, we'll see.
Let us know if you collect that human data to see if, to prove that observation, anecdotal data. All right, and then Dr. Kajira, we had some questions going back to the predators. And actually it was very timely because someone asked if the hammerheads feed on black tips right before you showed that video. And then there was another question about whether bull sharks feed on the black tips.
Right, yeah. So these black tip sharks are average size sharks. They're prey to bigger things like the hammers, the bull sharks, the tiger sharks that are down here. So all of these bigger sharks are also feeding on these medium-sized black tips. And if you wanted to see an example of that, I have a video. Do you want to see the hammerhead and the black tip video or not? Tell you what, take
there was a request to see it. So
okay. Let me share this. I'll preface this by saying this is one of those impossible, never happens unless you're happen to be extremely lucky. Whoops. Let me go. Whoops. Yeah, hit the wrong button. I need to share again. We were fishing off of, let's see, where am I? You see that ending slide, the credit slide with the Colgan Foundation name up there? Is that shared? Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. We were fishing and we had a black tip, a hammerhead come in and nail a black tip. And I had a GoPro on the stick, and I was saying to my student, Ryan, drive the boat. And I stuck the camera over the side of the boat, and I can't see. I can just sort of aim it in the general direction. I think they're over here somewhere. And we caught this footage. And so what you'll see here, as I dip the camera over, do you see the black tip in the mouth of that big hammerhead, right? That black tip's about 5.5 feet long. So you can get an idea of how big that hammerhead is. And so this was amazing. We never get to see this until, look what happens. Another hammerhead shows up to chase the first hammerhead. And I was saying, Ryan, drive the boat. And the first hammerhead drops the black tip. We drove the boat a little bit. I was able to stick the GoPro back underwater again. And then I was able to get this. That bigger hammerhead took the black tip, the dead black tip, from the smaller hammerhead and swam off with it in its mouth. All right. Now there's the smaller one chasing it, and you can see that pretty much that whole black tip has gone down the gullet of that big hammerhead. All that's left is the tail sticking out at this point. This is like National Geographic stuff, man. This never happens. But it was absolutely incredible to happen to be there to witness a predation event, first off, but to witness two hammerheads interacting with each other as they fought over this dead black tip. It was absolutely insane. So we were really fortunate to be able to see that. Let me see if I can stop that. And I'm really fortunate that we happened to have a GoPro on the boat. on a stick, and we could stick in the water and try and get that footage. So yeah, this sort of stuff does happen. They get taken out, and remember, those sharks are the same size as me. So if they can take out a blacktip that's 5.5 feet long, they could, you know, those big hammerheads, they're big.
And surely those blacktip have at least a little bit of speed on you, right?
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah, I'm much slower and more easily taken by a hammerhead.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We really thoroughly enjoyed your presentation and all of the photos and videos. We've had an exceptional amount of comments praising that.